Let me do this. It is my great honor, of course, to be here and coming to Boston proper for the first time. I think I've been in Massachusetts. I don't know where I was at, but I was at this place called Kripalu. Where is that at? That's in Massachusetts. Okay, well I know I was, yeah, I know I was close by. Stockton, Stockbridge. Okay, yeah. So that's why I know y'all faces from, and it's good to see you all. And yeah, so it's very interesting times that we are in. Um, for me personally, and for the planet Earth, as a whole. Um, Let me start with me personally. I was in Brazil for about 6 weeks, and I've grown to be very attached to that country. It was I was going between Ghana and Brazil, and I'm still with Ghana too, and all the other parts of the continent. But I have a certain affection for Brazil, and Kemetic yoga is very popular there. We have a lot of instructors who have been who are Brazilian, who have become certified there. We have over 100 instructors there in Brazil, and it's growing all the time. So one of the things I like about being there is because of the fact that it's warm all the time, even in the wintertime, and even in their wintertime, it's warm. The area that I go to all the time is called Bahia, which is the state. The word Bahia means the bay. It means bay because there's a big body of water there that they first took the Africans there when they stole them from Africa, and there was already Africans there when the white folks got there, but they don't really talk about that too much. And so the weather, the food, some of the best fruits you can get. I'm a vegan. I've been a vegan, not eating no meat or dairy or nothing like that for over 50 years. And so I like to go there because you can get your fruits very cheaply. Um, and my clothes are kind of big on me right now because I always lose about 10 or 15 pounds when I go there. And so just because I'm eating such good food, and I get up every morning and I do my yoga and I do running. I walk about 2 to 5 miles every day. So I go there to get my health back. And so or to preserve my health. I think I get healthy. I try to stay healthy all the time, no matter where I am. But I think that being in an environment like that makes a big difference. And also, recently, I went through I used to have this condition called a tremor, called a central tremor. It was affecting my right hand. So as you see, my right hand doesn't shake anymore. It's steady because I had this procedure, which is called focus ultrasound. And so basically, they put you in an MRI machine and they look at your brain and they find this one little tiny spot on your brain that's sending out the wrong signal it's making your whatever part of your body is being affected by it. And so it gets rid of that little spot, then your hand stops shaking. And so I had that, and one of the reasons I bring that up is because a lot of times we are afraid, we as sort of holistic, natural people who are with good reason to be suspicious of all of this technology and the people that are putting it together. Um, Sometimes we don't do certain things that can make a difference. And so for about 25 years, I had become left-handed because I couldn't eat with my right hand. I couldn't write with my right hand. I couldn't drink water with my right hand. Now my right hand is cured. I can do all the things I need to do. So so I'm happy about that personally. Those are significant things that's occurred to me on a personal level. Also, when we look at the planet Earth, um, this this thing called Trump was allowed to become the president of the United States. And it's not just him as an individual, of course, because he's just one person, but it's a whole cabal. I call him a cabal of evilness that are behind him. The dummy. He's like the dummy, like somebody has a ventriloquist has a dummy, and they just making the dummy pretending like the dummy is talking, but it's really somebody else talking. So we know that he's like a front man and stuff, but the people that in control of the planet right now, they're like the worst of the worst. They was already bad, but now they became worst. And so we see the world going into a state of war. We see the world going into a state of chaos, and it's not the worst thing in the world, but we kind of stuck in the middle of it, because we don't, all of us seem to be a little bit older. So, we got kids, grandkids. I got great grandkids. I don't want them to be out in the middle of this stuff when all of this stuff start falling down. So that's why I'm concerned about it. Um, and so when we look at the state of the world and we look at how did the world get into this state, we can see that it's not just an isolated thing. We have gone through I guess there was a sister who wrote a book. She called it the Ma'afa, right? Or the Ma'afa, which is like a Holocaust. And so, we've gone through our own Holocaust for at least 500 years. And if you go back into ancient times and you look at the invasions by other groups of people into Africa, we can see that these things have been going on for a long time, for thousands of years, not just for the last 400 to 500 years. And so we are able, as African people of African descent, we have been able to endure all of this craziness, all of this trauma, violence, attempts to destroy our culture, and we have not only continued to live as human beings, but we have also continued to thrive as human beings, and our spirit is indomitable in the sense that we cannot be conquered, we cannot be shut down, we cannot be made to be quiet. And so that is what we bring to this whole movement that I call, and that others have called cultural regeneration. And so that's the movement that we are all a part of. We are part of a cultural regeneration that's been going on for hundreds of years, but at least the last, say, 60, 70 years, where we are attempting to recapture our ancient culture and revitalize the ancient culture and allow the ancient culture to evolve in ways so that it is able to work for us, and so that it is able to, so that we can adapt that culture to our current needs. We live in an age of technology that didn't exist thousands of years ago. So we're not necessarily trying to reinvent or bring something back that doesn't fit this particular time. So we have to have the ability to have innovation. We have studios now, right? So we practice in studios, unless we can go out into the sun, we do that too. But we practice in studios. We use what's this machine? LCD projectors, PowerPoint, all the different technology. And we have, and much of this technology also is things that we have invented ourselves. We a lot of times we mistakenly give credit to Europeans as having been the ones who created this technology, but really we are the ones who have created a lot of, I would say, almost every major technological breakthrough was created by a Black person. Whether you know about it, GPS, a laptop, the circuit, what's the little computer chip, all that stuff was invented by Black people. I remember my father when he was a teenager during World War II. He created something that was used by the military, and his brother did too, to help a torpedo go straight. And so we have always been the ones at the forefront. So that's part of the reason why they chose to take certain ones of us into bondage, but not because we had just a strong back, but we had a mind, we had a genius, and we had knowledge and information that was able to be of use to them. Okay. And so when we look at everything that's been created, when we look at religion, science, technology, medicine, all of those things were created by Black people. And so my field is in the field of yoga. So my field is in the field of yoga, and how do we use yoga as a technology to rejuvenate and revitalize our culture? How do we use yoga as a technology to heal trauma? How do we use yoga as a technology to manage stress? How do we use yoga as a technology for increasing our ability to focus, increasing our ability to concentrate, increasing our ability to build internal health, to build health from an internal level rather than just from an external level? And so some of the things that we're going to share this weekend is around those things, and how do we really use technology, the technology of yoga from an African perspective. What words do we use in terms of yoga, words that come from Africa? How can we understand the African roots of yoga? People have always, some people have always come to me and told me, well, you shouldn't use the word yoga because that's an Indian word, and we're not Indians. We are from Africa. And my thing is that, well, if I started saying some obscure African word that nobody's ever heard of, nobody would never know what I was talking about. So when I use the word yoga, it did explain what the meaning behind yoga is, then they can understand. Also, those original people who who were in India and who created the systems of yoga that we associate with India, those people was us. They were Black people. So when Kamala Harris was running for president, they were talking about, oh, she's not black enough. Well, she is black, you know. Um, in fact, the idea of white supremacy comes from India because it was used as a way to create a caste system that dominated the darker skinned people and then put the lighter skinned people at the top. So they have a caste system, okay? And so even my grandmother, my Jamaican grandmother, she was from South Asia. She was the same person who Kamala Harris and her mama was, right? And I'm black, can't nobody tell me I ain't black, you know? So my thing, so the thing I'm saying is that, we have to be open to new information. We have to expand our definition of what is African. The continent, the borders of number one, all the countries in Africa, what the current countries in Africa is it's 52 countries? Where they get their names from and where they get the borders from? They didn't go back 200 years, they didn't have those names. They didn't have those borders, So all of this stuff is European created. So even the boundaries of Africa, I take exception to it. How come Africa doesn't include Saudi Arabia? How come you can't just move over a little bit and be in India, South Asia, and call that Africa? It's all connected together. Instead, they had to use this term called the Middle East. And what is the Middle East? We're on the East Coast, right? So if I go down from Boston down a little bit further south, is that the middle part of the East? It doesn't make no sense, the Middle East. When I was in grade school, I was in sixth grade in 1966, 65, something like that. And we had a geography book. And the geography book had a map of Africa. And on the map of Africa, there was an empty spot where Egypt is. And they put Egypt, they had the map here. In the corner of the page, they had Egypt. And they wrote underneath Egypt, they wrote Middle East. So they said it wasn't even it wasn't even part of the map. It wasn't even part of the continent of Africa. It's in somewhere in this place called Middle East, all by itself. That it can't even be connected to a continent. And it was crazy. So the falsification of history is something that we should be concerned about. The falsification of history should be something that we should understand in order to understand what is going on now. Why is there a person in the White House who says, we're going to get rid of all DEI? And then you have some black people who applaud it. Oh yeah, get rid of DEI because only white women benefit from DEI. But we need to look at it. We need to look at it a little bit deeper, a little bit closer. Okay. So getting rid of all references, the little bit of progress. When I say progress, that's not even the right word. The little bit of things that we force them to recognize, they're saying we want to get rid of all of that. We can't even have. You got a statue of Harriet Tubman out here, right? And so that probably pisses them off. Their blood boils when they see that statue. When they had to drive past, they said, "Look at that goddamn Harriet Tubman. Who was she?" And they gonna put on a $20 bill. No, take it away. All that kind of stuff. And so it pisses them off. Our very presence, our very existence, pisses them off. You go to a yoga studio, and you go in there and you got curves and stuff, and they be like, oh, y'all, this type of yoga not for you because this is not your body type. You got to be a skinny little white girl, and you know. So so even in the yoga world, even in the holistic health world, even in the world where you would expect people are supposed to be more open and more this and that, we see the racism, we see the discrimination. So for us in Chicago, and I'm sure other parts of the African diaspora, there was a need to have a yoga that spoke to the needs of ourselves, that spoke to our needs as Black people. And so that's the origins of Kemetic yoga, okay? So in the beginning, we used the term Egyptian yoga, and does this do anything? How you make the lights go off in here? Turn them down or something. There you go. Okay. Y'all can see that okay? Yeah. Okay, so I got to sit up here because I got a remote thing, but it's not working. Now right here, we're seeing what we call the pose of immortality, okay? And so right now you have an exhibit in Boston of the treasures of Tutankhamun. Who was Tutankhamun? He was a 19th dynasty king of ancient Kemet. The Europeans, they use this word called pharaoh, but his title was the Sarah and the Naisubiti. The Sarah means the son of the sun. So he is the son of Ra. And so by being the son of Ra, that gives him the authority to sit on the throne of Kemet. Okay, by him being the Naisubiti means that he is the king of both upper and lower Kemet, the united two lands. There's like you have 50 states in the United States and the president is over all 50 states. The upper and lower Kemet involve 42 nomes or 42 states or districts that they had their country divided into. And so when they say you are the Naisubiti, you are the lord of the upper and the lower parts of Kemet, okay? And so you have all of that stuff written here. Now, if you look closely, you can see that there is a figure here in a yoga posture. But it's a yoga posture that you're not going to see if you open up the books by B.K.S. Iyengar, Light on Yoga, or if you open up Complete Illustrated Book of Yoga by Swami Vishnu Devananda, or if you open up Integral Yoga by Swami Satchidananda, you're not going to see this posture because there were very unique postures and symbols associated with yoga that came from our ancestors, okay? And so these are the ones that we want to become familiar with. It's not saying that anything is wrong with the postures that we see coming from India and even the ones that come out of California, because most of the yoga poses that everybody is doing, they come out of California and London and Sweden, and I'll go into that later, okay? So this is called the pose, so we call this the pose of immortality. Why do we call it the pose of immortality? Because he is holding two symbols in his hands, in his right hand and his left hand, he's holding a symbol that stands for eternity. And so his name is He, H-E-H. And so he has, on top of his head, he has a circle, he has a sun disk. And that sun disk, I interpret it as being the Aten. The Aten is a disk that represents the sun. And on each side, you have a snake. You have a snake on this side, a snake on that side, and those two snakes represent the left and the right nostril. So in the Indian yoga system, they would call that the Ida and the Pingala. Okay? The left and the right nostril, the two opposite energies, the two opposite energy channels that operate in the body. Okay? He's seated on a platform called Nub, N-U-B. Where we at now in Boston? We in Nubian Square, right? The word Nub, which is the root of the word Nubia, it means gold because that was the place where the ancient Kemetic people got their gold from. They went to the south and they got gold from so-called Nubia, okay? And so his foundation is a foundation of gold. From a metaphysical perspective, gold represents the highest level of consciousness, okay? And so when you're practicing yoga, you're trying to elevate your consciousness. You're trying to change your consciousness. You're trying to evolve your consciousness from a lower level to a higher level, okay? And so he's in a yoga posture that is involves a twisting motion. So he's facing this direction, but he's coming down on one leg and then he's turning the spine, opening up the arms, and then turning the head, or opening up the cervical vertebrae of the neck. Okay? So when we practice Kemetic yoga, we divide the spine into 4 parts: the lower back, the middle back, the upper back, and then the neck. Okay? Because each one of those areas of the spine services a different part of the body, services a different set of organs, a different set of glands, and carries out different functions within the body. Okay? And so he's seated on one ankle. And so this ankle is open. The knee is bent, so on and so forth. This arm here is locked into the front leg, locked into the leg to give him leverage to allow him to twist and turn into the posture. Okay? And so in order to do Kemetic yoga, it's a very simple posture, but you have to refine your body in a way that allows you to go into the movement and come out of the movement comfortably, and to be able to use your breath in a manner which is allowing the circulation and the flow of life force and energy through your body. Okay? And so we call this the pose of immortality. Up here is a symbol called Heru Bendet. Now we in Boston, Massachusetts, right? I bet you if you walk around Boston, I know if you walk around Philadelphia, if you walk around DC, I ain't never been to Boston, but you see these symbols a lot in these older places where the founders of this country used our ancient symbols to give meaning to the enterprise that they were starting to do, called America, this corporation called America, right? And so they use our symbols in order to justify what they was doing, in order to give some type of symbolic significance and to relate it back to ancient times, to relate it back to the beginning of Western civilization. And so you see this symbol a lot. It's called the Heru Bendet. So it is a set of wings. It is a sun disk in the middle. And on each side of the sun disk, you have a snake, a serpent here and a serpent there in the form of a cobra, okay? And this is the same symbol that they use as part of the medical symbol. They call it the medical caduceus, right? But when you go to Kemet, as Michelle and Denise have gone with me, and and many other people. You see this everywhere in Kemet, and you see the medical symbol. You see the staff. The Europeans call it the staff of Asclepius, and so it's a staff, and it has a snake going up, and sometimes it has two snakes going up like that, right? And so, and so we see that they have taken our symbols, they have repurposed them for their own purposes. And they changed the name, they use a Greek pronunciation for the words, they use a Roman or Latin pronunciation for the symbol, and so on and so forth. Okay? And so that is and so this is supposed mortality. So this chair, and I know Sister Michelle, she did the pose perfectly when she saw this chair. So she imitated the pose, or she performed the pose perfectly when she saw it in the museum in Cairo. Okay. And so again, this was part of this, and so right now you have an exhibit in Boston of the treasures of Tutankhamun. Those treasures came to Chicago in about 1976, 1977. They were discovered by white folks, by Europeans, in 1922 by a man named Howard Carter, okay? And the first time they went on exhibit, on a global exhibit, was in 1976, 77. And that's where they came to Chicago, okay? And so this chair, this is the back part of the chair, the part where you put your back up against. So this chair was part of the exhibit. The last time I was in Kemet, they built a whole new grand museum. I can't find the chair no more. Now I'm not saying it's some kind of conspiracy or something, but they've changed it. Maybe the chair is in Boston, so y'all should go and see the exhibit to see if the chair is there. But this chair gave us the code, the keys to break the code of Kemetic yoga. When my teacher and myself thought about yoga, we thought about yoga as being having an African origin, but we did not have the information or the tools to say, well, we know that everything comes from Africa. That's like what Denise was saying, right? In her beautiful poetry. But, having the evidence. So when we saw this come to Chicago in that exhibit, we said, oh, okay. And then we figured out, well, how do we do that posture? But because we were already skilled in yoga, martial arts, Tai Chi, and different movements of the body, we were able to figure out how to do this position, how to use the breath properly to create an energetic flow while doing that position, okay? And so that is a little bit of the history of the pose of immortality, as we call it, or the pose of He. And this is my teacher. His name is Dr. Azar Hapi. The reason why he has the title doctor is not because just because people are calling him a doctor, but because he actually is a doctor. He's a doctor of a science, a healing science called naturopathy. And so naturopathy is comes under I guess the umbrella of osteopathy. So osteopathy, it was a science of healing through manipulation of the bones. changing or affecting the structure of the body in such a way as to facilitate healing. And so chiropractic came from osteopathy, okay? And then later naturopathy. And the first school of naturopathy was in Chicago, okay? And so we had early great masters of naturopathy, such as Roland Sidney, a Black man who helped to elevate naturopathy to a higher level, okay? And so, for example, we would watch Roland Sidney do a demonstration of naturopathic treatment. He would take he had a white, the demonstration I went to, he had a white kid, like a teenager, and he had a lot of acne on his face. And he took him and he manipulated his neck and opened up his circulation and blood vessels and all kind of stuff. And you could watch the dude in real time and watch his acne disappear off his face. As the treatment started to take effect. And so it was from that because our teacher, Dr. Hapi, was a naturopath, he understood movement of the body. So that's where we get this idea that we call geometric progression and alignment. So when we practice Kemetic yoga, we don't go real fast. We don't hop, skip, and jump. We go slowly, and we put a lot of emphasis on combining the breath with the movement, okay? So we use the exhalation of the breath to release tension from the body in the same way the naturopath does. If you go to the chiropractor say, okay, put your head right here, let me hear it. And he say, click, 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 real fast, right? You go to so the chiropractic treatment it might take 10, 12, 15 minutes. The naturopathic treatment takes about an hour to an hour and a half because he's going much slower. And he's telling you to inhale, hold your breath for a second, now slowly exhale and turn. He twists you into the position. He turns your body along in coordination with your breath. This is how we do Kemetic yoga, okay? And so we have taken that same innovation that was put into osteopathic types of treatment, and we have put that into the Kemetic practice or the practice that we call Kemetic yoga, okay? And so what I've done, I've taken that idea and I call it part of what we call yoga skills method, combining rule of 4 breathing and geometric progression, okay? And we'll get more into that as we go forward, okay? Now, in 1980, Dr. Hapi, he made a video called Egyptian Yoga. Okay, so before we started using the term Kemetic yoga, I was the first one to use the term Kemetic yoga for very specific reasons. I started saying Kemetic. For one thing, I felt that was the more proper term to use the term Kemetic rather than Egyptian. But the first of anything, a book or a video or anything that was published under the name Egyptian Yoga was a VHS video that was published by my teacher, Dr. Hapi, in 1980. Okay, 1980, that's very important. Because in 1995, a dude wrote a book called Egyptian Yoga. Yeah, and he never said nothing about Dr. Hapi, about Yesera Hotep. He never said nothing about nobody. Because he don't even have one reference in the book. He called me up and said, hey, I wrote this book. I want you to check it out. I said, okay, send it to me. And I saw the book, I just put it to the side because I said, this book is not nothing, you know. And but because people are not experienced with yoga and with systems and healing, see, we was already doing martial arts. We was already doing Tai Chi. We was doing a lot of different things. We was practicing yoga we were practicing yoga using the book of BKS Iyengar, Light on Yoga, but we was doing it using our own technique. Okay, we wasn't following BKS Iyengar's instruction because we felt like his instruction was too harsh, was too rigid, because it came out of an era of Indian history when the schools, when the yoga schools of India were being dominated by the British colonizer, and they were using those schools as a training ground for young male Indians so that they could serve in the military. And so both both Iyengar and Patobi Joyce, Iyengar did Iyengar yoga, Patobi Joyce did Ashtanga yoga. Both of them come out of those schools under their teacher, whose name I would forget, Krishna or somebody. But from those schools, from the early 20th century, late 19th century, that were very harsh, So BKS Iyengar, he would pop you if your leg was out of place, so your hip was, it's like, so they put a lot of emphasis on the physical, rugged aspect, the gymnastic aspect of yoga, okay? And we rejected that intuitively because we said, this is not how yoga is supposed to be. But we liked all the different poses and postures they was doing. So we could do the poses, we could do the postures, but we did them slow with the breath and in a manner that allowed for the movement and the flow of energy, okay? And so 1980 is when you have this Egyptian yoga VHS, okay? And then here's another man. His name is Babakar Khan. They call him Yogi Khan. Okay, look what he's doing. He's doing his own interpretation of ancient Kemetic yoga. Now, I'm 72, so I started doing yoga in the 70s, right? This man, he started doing yoga in the 60s. He was a protege of Sheikh Anta Diop. So y'all know who Sheikh Anta Diop is, right? So he is the godfather. He is the founder, so to speak, of the modern Kemetic movement of scholarship. And so he was a protege of Sheikh Anta Diop in the 60s. So this man is I'm 72, this man is in his 90s, right? And independent of any, we didn't know nothing about him, he didn't know nothing about us, but he was doing his own, he was coming to the same conclusions, that Black people, that yoga was something that came out of ancient Kemet. Okay, he came to that conclusion because when you find out that medicine, architecture, mathematics, everything, agriculture, everything come out of Kemet, then it's only logical. Well, yeah, yoga did too. Dance does, music does, all of the 4/4 rhythm and 6/1 and all that has origins in ancient Kemet. And all these different vibrational frequencies, all of those have origins in ancient Kemet. So how come yoga does? How come you think people in ancient Kemet didn't meditate, didn't sit down and close their eyes and just breathe? How come you have to be an Indian to know how to do that? But you got to be an Indian to cross your legs into the lotus position stand in your head or do whatever, you know, people do these things naturally, okay? And so Babakar Yogi Khan from Senegal, he started he developed his own system of yoga that he called Yoga of the Pharaohs. And he also used the word Samai Tawi. Okay. So when y'all hear people saying, oh, I do Samai Tawi, blah, 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 that original term for yoga being called Samai Tawi comes from this man in the 60s. Okay. And when I went to France, because he lives in Switzerland now. And I went to Europe and I was going to be in Paris and he was going to be in Paris at the same time. So I'm sending out word I want to meet with him. And for some reason, I got a lot of interference about meeting with him. And so I never was able to meet with him. And the reason why I wasn't able to meet with him was because he thought I was somebody else. He thought there was an American who wanted to meet him, a Black American who did yoga. So he thought I was somebody else. So then when he realized, oh man, I messed up, that was Yasir, then, we got together later. But he thought I was the guy who took all his information and never gave him no credit for it. See, like just like you let me talk to Wayne Chandler. Wayne Chandler, he worked with the brother, they did the but they Wayne Chandler Qigong. Yeah, Wayne Chandler does Qigong. But his book, Ancient Future, look at the book. It's full of references in it. And then you look at somebody else's book, ain't got a single reference, a single footnote, a single name of nobody else where I got the information from. That's not the correct way to do things, So, therefore, I did meet with this brother, and that's him and me right there with his book. And so his books are the books that were the first books written. They weren't the first books written about a yoga that comes from Kemet. Because I got some books that was written back in at the turn of the century, at the turn of the 20th century, about yoga from Kemet. But his book was the first book. He has 3 or 4 books, and his books are the first books that was written about Kemet, about yoga from an ancient Kemetic perspective, written by us. White folks, they've been doing Kemetic yoga, ancient Egyptian yoga for decades and decades. They've been doing yoga from an ancient Kemetic perspective for over 100 years. White folks have been having Kemetic temple, like we go to, we go to the Kemetic temple in New York and Harlem and Brooklyn or wherever. We go to all these different places and we say, oh, we started a temple doing this. White folks was doing that over 100 years ago, longer. They was learning how to translate the Medu Neter. They were calling themselves, Kemetic priests 100 years ago. They beat us to doing this stuff, And so, so we. What's the name of that book that you're holding? That's his book. That's his book. Okay. Yeah, that's his book, and it's in French. Okay. So it's something like Pharaoh. It's something like Yoga of the Pharaohs or something like that.
Does he have any of the books English? Like, are they all?
I've never seen none in English. But what you should do is Google him. His name is Babakar Khan, Yogi Khan. He's on. He got a Facebook page, and then you can get his books, and maybe one day he'll get them translated into into English or something like that. But the thing about The thing about him is that he created the term called Samaitawi. So people hear that term Samaitawi and they say, oh, that's the name for yoga. That's not the name that the ancient Egyptians or that ancient people of Kemetic used for the practice of yoga. That was his word as a substitute for the word yoga, because the word Samaitawi means to unite the two lands. Samai means unite. Tawi, ta means land. We means two. So uniting the two lands. So it's a metaphor for yoga, which is unite oneself, to yoke oneself, to bring oneself under the control over the, under the control over the of the mind, And so he never said that the people of the ancient Egypt, they used the word Samaitawi to say yoga. No, nobody knows what exact word that the ancestors used for the practice of yoga. My contention is that nobody knows that word. So it's just speculation. So we use the word, we in Kemetic yoga, what word do we use? We use the word Wat Ma'at. And that just means the way of Ma'at. Because we say that the most logical, simplest way is to describe yoga is Ma'at. And when you use the word Ma'at, you're using a word that was universal throughout Kemet. The word Ma'at was the foundation, the concept of Ma'at was the foundation of the entirety of Kemetic psychology, of Kemetic spiritual science. When you became the king, you had to take a vow that you were going to uphold Ma'at. When you became any important figure in the society, you had to take a vow that you were going to uphold Ma'at. So if you were the king, you gave your life to maintain Ma'at. And so Ma'at, it meant living your life in a manner that was in alignment with the principles and with the ideals of order, balance, harmony, justice, reciprocity, okay? And what are the things that can disrupt Ma'at? Dishonesty, duplicity, lying, stealing, killing, and also having somebody invade your country from another place. So when you go to Kemet, you look at the monuments. Go to Abu Simbel, what they call Abu Simbel, which should be called Rameses Beri-Amun. But when we go to this place called Abu Simbel, we see the 4 big statues of Ramses II sitting like this across, 4 statues sitting. You see that he is saying in all of the symbols that he placed in the temple that I upheld Ma'at because I took all the enemies of Kemet. And so symbolically, he's grabbing all of them by the hair. There's about 10, 15 of them. And he's got his sword or his club, his war club up, and he's about to bust them upside the head. So I have smited all the enemies of Kemet in order to uphold Ma'at. Okay, you see symbols where um, um, the deity is giving a small figure of Ma'at in their hand to the ruler, to the person who's become the king or the queen, and they are being given Ma'at, meaning that we're giving you the responsibility. Your responsibility to uphold Ma'at is because you have made a sacred vow to the divine to uphold Ma'at. Okay? And so Ma'at was like fundamental. It was like the foundation of everything. But we have to understand Ma'at as order, balance, harmony, so on and so forth. A lot of time we say, oh, there's 42 laws of Ma'at or 42 negative confessions or 42 this, that, and the other. All of that is fine. But those are for the children. The adults needed to understand Ma'at from a philosophical and from a metaphysical perspective. What does Ma'at really mean from those perspectives? Not just, oh, I shouldn't kill. Oh, I shouldn't lie. Oh, I shouldn't, that nobody should have to tell you those things. But when you start to live your life in a certain way, you start to live your life in a manner that is automatically putting you in alignment with Ma'at. When you start to practice your yoga, your meditation, when you start to do your movements and your postures, your body, your mind, your internal energy aligns you with Ma'at. And so that's what you're trying to do. Okay? And so going back to Brother Khan, Samai Tawi means uniting the two lands. And so the symbol is one figure on the right side, one figure on the left side, and in the middle is a windpipe with the lungs at the bottom. And one figure is holding the stem from lotus, and one is holding the stem from the papyrus plant. And they're tying both of those around the windpipe to unite the two. Okay? And so this brother said that is a metaphor for yoga. He didn't say that that's what they called yoga. He says it's a metaphor for the practice of yoga, uniting these two opposite forces together. And so, in a sense, if you are uniting the two lands, you're taking the upper Kemet and the lower Kemet. Upper Kemet just means that it's to the south. Lower Kemet just means that it's to the north. It doesn't mean that one is higher than the other or more important than the other. So there was never no idea of a higher self and a lower self. This idea that there's a higher self and a lower self, and the lower self is trying to do battle against the higher self. That's Christian stuff. When you got the devil on one shoulder and the angel on the other shoulder, and one has got your ear over here, one got your ear over there, and you fighting against yourself because your lower self is trying to go down this way, and your higher self, that's Christianity. That's a childish version of Christianity. It has nothing to do with Heru and Set. It has nothing to do with nothing from Kemet. The Kemetic African people did not think like that. The Sphinx, like you hear people say, oh, the Sphinx represents the higher self versus the lower self. So they said that the head of the Sphinx is a human representing the higher self, And the body of the Sphinx is a lion representing the lower self. He's an animal. But how come Tahuti has the head of a bird and the body of a human? So which one is the higher self and the lower self? So that is a misinterpretation. The statue which we call the Sphinx is called Heru Im Akhet. And it means Heru of the eastern horizon. It has nothing to do with no higher selves and lower selves. It means Heru is looking out at the eastern horizon as the sun is rising up in the constellation of Leo. That's what that represents. Nothing to do with no higher self and lower self. When you see Set, and when you hear the story about Set and Asar, Set tricked Asar, Set killed Asar, and all that stuff. That don't mean that Set represents the lower self. When Set and Heru does battle, that doesn't mean that Heru is the higher self and Set is the lower self. These are literary devices that was used to tell the story, but 99.9% of the time that you see Set is defending Asar against Apep. Apep is like a snake that does like this, undulating. And you see Set on the bow of the boat with a spear trying to stick Apep to protect Asar. So how does that make Set the lower self? You have a king whose name was Seti I. He was the father of Ramses II. His name was Set. So if Set is evil, why would I name myself Set? That's like the Pope naming himself Satan. It doesn't make any sense. So that whole interpretation has to be revised. And this whole idea of a higher self, and I'm struggling with my higher self, my lower self is trying to come up and make me do, that's just do some yoga and do some meditation, you'll be fine, But you're not having a higher and a lower self, In ancient Kemet, when I talk to brother Babakar Khan, he asked me, he said, what do you think about the idea of the chakras, the way it's portrayed in ancient Kemet? And I told him, I said, in Kemet, they had two chakras. They had this one at the top of the head, and they had this one in the middle of the forehead. So we call this the crown chakra at the top. We call this one the Ajna chakra in the middle of the forehead. They don't talk about no chakra down here, no chakra in the solar plex. And they don't talk about all these different chakras. Where in the literature, where in the symbolism do they talk about all these chakras? They don't talk about them. So what they say is that, so they put the emphasis on the crown. So you see the sun disk. You see the sun disk on top of the head. And then you got other symbols I'll show you later of the snake coming out of the middle of the forehead. And that's what you see. And so he said, I agree. I see the same thing. I don't see no 7 chakras. And even with the 7 chakra theory, you have more than 7 chakras, because you have chakras in your fingertips, your palms of your hands, the back of your knees, the bottom of your feet. You have a lot of chakras, And I'm not saying chakras don't exist and stuff like that. What I'm saying is that what did they put the emphasis on? They put the emphasis on this one and this one. And they said, from my interpretation of what I see them saying symbolically, is that energy rises, it goes to the crown of the head, and then it goes into the middle of the forehead. So it doesn't go like this and go to the middle of your forehead and then go to the top of your head. It goes to your top of your head first, and then it goes into the middle of the forehead. Okay? Now, there's nothing wrong with saying that it goes the other way, but our interpretation, based upon the way that our ancestors seem to express it, was that energy goes to the crown and then it goes to the middle of the forehead. And so we can give evidence of that. Okay. And every year in Chicago, we do something called Soul Yoga Fest. This was the first Soul Yoga Fest. Soul Yoga Fest began as a pop-up, like a pop-up. We just say, hey, everybody meet us out on the lake. And now, so this was the first one. All these people came out on the lake, and then it evolved into a multinational event called Soul Yoga Fest. And so now we have Soul Yoga Fest in Chicago going on 16 years every year. We have one, we've had it in Las Vegas, Atlanta. We have one in Kansas City every year. I think we're going on the 5th year. This coming June, we have Soul Yoga Fest in Brazil. The second one is coming up in October. We have Soul Yoga Fest in Kingston, Jamaica twice. We're going to do another one in 2027 that's going to be in the grill. So Soul Yoga Fest. So I'm saying this to say Kemetic yoga has become a movement. So nobody, they don't put us on CNN. They don't put us on, when we go to yoga Alliance and Kripalu and ask them for some money to help us. They say, oh yeah, blah blah blah, and then they just ignore me. So they don't say they don't contribute anything. But so everything we do it on our own. Now this is yoga. This is the oldest image of yoga. So when they say the yoga is 5,000 years old and it comes from India, this is what they go by. Okay? So they saying that this is the oldest image of somebody practicing yoga that exists. That's what they say. Okay? I say not. Okay? And even when you date this image, it doesn't even go back 5,000 years. It go back to maybe 3,000 years ago. Is another image that they say goes back 5,000 years. So this is the evidence that they use to say that yoga is from India and it goes back thousands of years. Now you can see these images here. These are only so many hundreds of years old. These are not thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago and stuff like that. There is one person who argues that yoga is being practiced by today in terms of the main people who have influenced yoga in the modern yoga movement in terms of Iyengar. So this is BKS Iyengar. And this person who wrote this book is arguing that they were influenced by the British gymnastics. And so this is the earlier British guy, and this is the later, years later, Iyengar. So the argument is that these people, here goes the guy doing a leg behind the head, standing one leg pose, and here goes Iyengar doing the same pose, doing the split. And so their argument is that these postures that we see, this heavy emphasis on postures, and very hard to do postures, that this was influenced by British gymnastics. Okay? Because know your history. The British did what? They colonized India. You know, you go to India, they speak English, right? You know, they speak basically, you know, they be saying pip pip tally ho, you know, and all that stuff. You know, they be speaking with a stronger British accent than the British people do. You know, and so that's one argument that some people make. And here goes during the during the late 1800s, the early 1900s, you had a lot of emphasis on gymnastic type movements, on because that was part of the era called the eugenics movement, right? And the eugenics movement was saying that that we had to have a strong genetic foundation for our race. Come on, white people, for us in order to survive, for us in order to thrive. And so you have movements come about. The YMCA movement, Young Man Christian Association, right? Young, male, and Christian. You know, think about today's incels. You know, that's a whole other story. Y'all know what the incel is, right? That's a white guy who can't get none. He has involuntary celibacy because he's so messed up, the women don't even like him. So those are the people that's running. That's Peter Thiel. Y'all know Peter Thiel. Y'all know all these Elon Musk. Nobody wants, he wasn't rich. Nobody would want him. So I'm sorry, but these are current sociological, psychological streams that are moving through Western culture that we need to be understanding, to understand the inner psychology. I studied at the Northeastern Illinois Center for Inner City Studies. I got a master's degree from there. That's why I learned how to read and write Madhu Nature. We used to study white psychology, white sociology. We use sociological, anthropological, and psychological techniques to study white folks. Okay? And so we come to the conclusion that they were sexually repressed, that they were homicidal and suicidal. So you need to look at these things in your analysis of what's going on with these people. Why they starting these wars? Why they want to blow up? What's going on? Why they have this allegiance to Israel the way that they do? Because these people are so crazy, they believe that if there is a nuclear holocaust, it's going to cause Jesus to come back. So they are willing to cause a nuclear holocaust to blow up all of us so that they can be one of the 144,000 to rise up and go to heaven. This is what they're thinking. And we miss all of that. You know? So, this is a very popular, I'm sorry, he used to be popular, but now he ain't popular no more because they took him and they, they said, well, he did it to himself. I don't know, I don't know what happened, but this guy, this is Chadoni Bikram, right?
Mhm.
And so he came to the U.S. I think in the late 60s, maybe this early 70s or something, and he got connected with the Hollywood people, and everybody was doing yoga underneath him, and he was very aggressive. His personality was very assertive. And he created this Bikram yoga that is now called hot yoga because they got him out of it and they got the concept of the yoga they call hot yoga. But he called it Bikram yoga. And he said that you raise the temperature up to a certain level in the room, and then you do a set of poses in a sequence. And he got a patent or a trademark or something on that sequence of poses at that temperature. And so he said that he invented that, you know. And so as you see, people come, it'd be 400 people come to his training, and they're paying almost $10,000 a person to go for his training. And all they doing is learning at least to me, maybe, but to me, all they're doing is learning how to, learn it, not necessarily even learn how to do the intricacies of yoga, but just learning how to stand up in front of a group of people and say, okay, do this first, do this second. Okay, and so for the first part, they got 26 poses. For the second part, they got 52 or something like that, right? And that's it. And so because they turn the temperature up and you sweating, people think the sweating is equivalent to losing weight. Sweating is just losing water. You're not losing weight. Now you may lose weight because you're doing other things along with your sweating, but just sweating and losing water is not the same as losing weight. Okay. And so anyway, so he is one of the so for you all who don't know the yoga industry, then you got Iyengar yoga, Ashtanga yoga. You have different schools of yoga that are the mainstream. Okay, and Bikram is one of those. And now they got rid of Bikram because they said that he was harassing too many women. And so now they got, so now they just use the term hot yoga. Okay. He goes some people out in the Olympics back around the turn of the century. We in the 21st century. We are 1/4 of the way into the 21st century. Did y'all used to watch the Jetsons on TV and stuff like that? We ain't got no flying cars. We ain't got nothing. We just got madness. He goes to World War I soldiers. World War I was between 1914 and 1918, right? They out there doing y'all warrior pose and stuff. You know? Here goes your mass-produced yoga. Everybody, probably at a Bikram event. Everybody is doing yoga. I think this is out in Times Square somewhere. Everybody doing the same yoga posture. And so you got certain corporations like Gaiam and, I'm not gonna be up to date on all the corporations and stuff, but you have certain companies that design, like that's what she got. That's probably $300 worth of stuff. She got a yoga mat, a yoga mat carrier. She got a bag that can carry the yoga mat. She got a yoga bottle. She got her shorts, and she got a t-shirt. That's about $300-400 worth of stuff she got on. And so yoga is a multi-billion-billion-dollar industry. And so so this is the headquarters of one of the big yoga companies, Gayam, that out in California somewhere. This is a guy named Furenstein. Furenstein. you know, and he was one of he's dead now, but I think his name was George. And so he was one of the people who put together the whole yoga mystique. He's the one who he wrote the books that define what yoga is and what yoga is not. Okay, so he's the one who put the definition of what yoga is that everybody follows. And so he created the foundation, what became this multi-billion-dollar industry. So we have something called Yoga Alliance, right? And the Yoga Alliance, I remember when they first wanted to create a Yoga Alliance, and they was putting word out in the yoga world, should we have a Yoga Alliance? And I was like, no, we don't need that. We just keep on doing what we do. We don't need nobody trying to tell us what to do. But then enough people succumbed to the idea of a Yoga Alliance, so that in the beginning it was like Becky, Susie, Jane, and so they was together, and then they was just 3-4 people, and then now they are multi-million, or if not multi-billion-dollar organization. They got over 100,000 yoga schools as part of the Yoga Alliance. I'm part of Yoga Alliance. So we had to pay them hundreds of dollars every year for your school to be registered with them. And then you as a yoga teacher, you got to pay $100-something or something like that every year so that you could be registered with the Yoga Alliance, so that then people would recognize you as being a legitimate yoga school or legitimate yoga teacher. So if you're not with Yoga Alliance, it's going to be hard for you to get recognized as being legitimate, because you're not letting Mary Sue and Jane and little Barbie, get your money. So this is Imhotep. So we say this is the like the Indian people, or the people, the traditional yoga people. They say this guy named Patanjali he wrote the Yoga Sutras, and he wrote these books about yoga and so on and so forth, and he defined what yoga is. And so we say Imhotep we go back to Imhotep. Now we can go beyond, we can go before Imhotep too, right? But Imhotep, his name means Prince of Peace. Okay? He was the world's first multi-genius. He was a vegetarian or vegan. He was a yogi. He practiced meditation. We should relate back to him. Nobody knows a historical person named Patanjali. We don't know if he was one person. We don't know if he was a group of people that wrote these yoga sutras over time. We don't really know. We just know that there's a set of writings called the Yoga Sutras that are attributed to this particular person. Okay, this person designed the first pyramid. Okay, so he was operating over almost 6,000 years ago. So the first pyramid, the idea of building a pyramid came from his mind. Okay. This is a whole nother thing. This is another image of the some of this stuff is sort of mixed up, but this is another image of the pose mentality I showed you earlier. So you can see it as a drawing. So I'm sure you can see it more clear now. You can see the person whose name is He. He is in the posture. You can see the sun disk on top of his head. You can see the two snakes on each side, and so on and so forth. And you can see the titles of the king. His name is in this. This says Tutankhamun, and this is his title, the Sa Ra. He's the son, Sa Ra, son of the sun. This bird is Sa, and this it's supposed to be a circle at the top. That's the sun, Sa Ra. And this is Naisubiti. It's a bumblebee. Okay, y'all see the little bumblebee with the wings? And then there's a BT, there's a plant right there. And so he's the Nisut BT. He's the Lord of Upper and Lower Kemet. Okay, and then this is his Kepra name. This is Kepra, meaning he who has been reborn, who is able to come again. So he is a rebirth of the king. Okay. This is not the chair. This is a replica of the chair. And on the bottom of the chair here, you can see the Samai-Tawi. I think some of it is missing. But see the lungs? See, this is windpipe right there. And that's the lungs right there at the bottom. Y'all see that? Yeah. Here you see, who is that? Somebody help me. No, that's our set. Yeah. Yeah, so she has a throne on her head. And so my aunt has the feather on top of her head. But both of them do the same posture, right? And so she wears the throne on top of her head. Why? Because she is the throne. She is the mother. Everything is built up, everything in Africa, including ancient Kemet, which is in Africa, which was populated by African people who thought like Africans, who acted like Africans, and who created like Africans. This is, she is the sacred feminine. And so the whole civilization is built upon the woman. Okay, it's not built upon a dude. And they don't say our Father who art in heaven. They say our mama. You know, our mama, our mother who is heaven. You know, she's heaven because she's the mother. That's where you go. You come from the source. Your source is from your mother, and you return back to the source when you go back to the other side. Okay? And so she is the throne. So she has a throne on top of her head. She's a healer, the metaphysician, she's a magician, she's a self-creator, she is a nurturer, she is the foundation. She is the foundation upon which everything is based. Okay? When you see the images, the image, the icon that they got the image of Jesus sitting on the lap of his mother Mary. They got that from seeing Aset holding the king on her lap. Except when she's holding the king on her lap, he is not a baby. He is a fully grown person with a crown on his head. Well, he may be smaller than her, but he's a fully grown person. And he represents the idea that the mother is the foundation of the entire society, and that the king is sitting on the lap of the mother. So she is the throne. The way that you would learn, the way that you know who is supposed to be the next king is through the lineage of the mother. That is how it is throughout all of Africa. Kingship is going through the lineage of the mother, not through the lineage of the father. Okay? You got to go? I'm going too long? Okay, I'm going to wrap it up in a minute. Give me one more minute. Okay, here goes the place called, they call this Abu Simbel. The proper name is Ramesses Mary Amun. Okay, Ramses is the person sitting. He was very proud of himself, so he made himself 4 times across the front there. Each one of these statues is 65 feet tall. Each one of these statues, this whole complex, this temple, it was built out of a solid mountain. It was carved. They didn't come and put those statues there. It was carved out of the mountain. This one right here, it fell down because it was an earthquake. That's why that one is broken. Okay? And so this is the doorway of the temple. And so you go inside the doorway and it goes 190 feet into the interior that they dug out of this mountain. Okay? And he built this. This is almost on the southern border, on the northern border of Sudan. So he built it all the way down south into Upper Kemet in order to show the people who live there, I am the king of all of y'all. So I'm gonna put this big old thing here with all my 4 statues, and I'm gonna just say, don't mess with me, because I'm the king. Okay? And so the significance of this is that he's sitting in meditation. We see these statues of Buddha and we say, oh, look at Buddha, he's meditating. We got statues, all the statues of all the so-called pharaohs, they all meditating. That's what they do. They sit there like this and they meditate. If you go to Nation of Islam meetings and stuff, you have to sit like this, right? You have to sit like this. So one time I was in Egypt and I'm listening to one of the tour guides. That's why when y'all go to Egypt, go with the right people. Go with the right tour company. Because the tour guide was telling the people, somebody said, what does it mean when he sits like that? He said, oh, that means I give mercy to the people. So I'm sitting like this because I'm giving mercy to the people. And that's stupid. He wasn't cruel to the people. There was no, this whole idea that there was cruelty, slavery, anger, all that kind, that's all a bunch of propaganda. It's the same thing they said about them people. Well, I ain't gonna go to that. But, but it's just propaganda. So the king of Kemet was not an evil, mean person who was oppressing everybody and making people build pyramids and stuff. The pyramids, when you go to the pyramids, you can go see the tombs of the people that built them. So it wasn't no aliens, it wasn't no, no people from Alpha Centauri, wherever they're supposed to be from. There were just some people, and their names is such and such and such and so, and how many pieces of, how many loaves of bread they ordered for a particular day, how many pieces of garlic that the people ate, how many tools and supplies they had to order. All that stuff is written down in the records of ancient Kemet. There is no reason why anybody should say, we don't know how the pyramids was built. We don't know who built the pyramids, and we don't know how they was built. They was built because the people were smart. There was no damn idiots. They didn't have to have nobody come from outer space to teach them. I mean, you know, it take a lot for somebody to go to another planet. How much does it take for somebody to come down to this planet? And then they're gonna teach you how to build a pyramid out of stone. They got to take technology to come all the way from billions of light years away. A light travels at the speed of 186,000 miles per second. So how far can you go traveling at that speed in a year? That's 1 light year. Traveling, and so you got to travel 1,000 light years from a whole nother planet to come to Earth and say, hey, y'all, take these rocks and make them into pyramids. Like, that's just, it doesn't make any sense. Okay? So, so tomorrow we're going to practice yoga. We're going to do Kemetic yoga. We're going to practice rule of 4 breathing, geometric progression, and we're going to do yoga the way that our ancestors did. Okay? And then Sunday we're going to go up to the museum. We're going to see what they got up in there, what they have stolen, put in the museum, and we're going to have to liberate it as much as we can with knowledge. Okay, any questions? Yes, sir.
What are your thoughts about, like, some people say there's pyramids in the Grand Canyon or remnants of Kemetic? I've been hearing a lot about that, like remnants of Kemetic artifacts in the Grand Canyon area.
I don't see no evidence of it.
Okay.
Now, it could be true that they came all the way from Egypt, went across the Atlantic, went to the East Coast United States, they went all the way to the Grand Canyon. I've been to the Grand Canyon. I didn't see no army bases stopping you from going there. I know people who went all the way down and went through the Colorado River and went on the raft, and none of them reported to me that there was helicopters or that there was army bases stopping you from going here and going there. And the whole story is based upon this dude named Kincaid. And they say that in 1910 or 1908 or something, that he found this cave there and they don't want you to know about it, so therefore they suppressed it. And it's like, okay, why they don't want you to know? Out of all the stuff they don't want you to know, how come they don't want you to know that? You know? So I don't, it could be true, but I don't see no evidence of it. And I don't see the likelihood of why the people would travel all the way from Kemet, thousands and thousands. I mean, that's a long ass way. When I went to Brazil, it took me 10 hours to get from Chicago to go to Brazil on an airplane. So if I'm taking a boat and walking all the way from Egypt, and why am I gonna go to the Grand Canyon? And then I'm gonna go there and I'm gonna build pyramids all up in this. Like the Grand Canyon goes down 3,000 feet, and I'm gonna go all on the inside of in a cave, and then try to figure out a way to make like it's unfeasible to me. But anything is possible.
But pyramids all around the world, all the different pyramids all around the
Yeah, pyramid is an easy structure to build.
They can't build one perfectly now to this day.
No, they can build one perfectly. They can't duplicate the way that nobody's been able to duplicate the way that the people in Kemet did. But pyramids are, you can make a pyramid, and many cultures around the world have made pyramids. But I don't think it's as, over the years, since I'm older now, I don't think it's meaningful as it used to be that all these different cultures and civilizations have pyramids. I think it's like, yeah, okay, we got pyramids, but the pyramids in Kemet, those pyramids are made out of solid stone, right? The pyramids in Mexico, right? And I've been to the ones in Mexico. I've been to the ones in Belize. I've been to pyramid. I like pyramids. They all made very differently than the ones in Kemet. The ones in Kemet, the ones in Mexico, you can walk up to the top. They got an altar up there where they killed somebody and stabbed them and tore their heart out, and they stand at the top of the pyramids. So they did a lot of. So those pyramids was different than the pyramids they built in Kemet. The ones in Kemet, I believe that they was tombs. Now people say, oh, there wasn't no tomb, blah blah blah. I believe that they was tombs because of the fact that if you examine them, you could see Neb Ankh, what they call the sarcophagus, inside of them. You go to the Pyramid of Saqqara. The Pyramid of Saqqara was supposed to be the first pyramid that was ever built, right? The step pyramid, right? You go inside of there and you look down, or you walk down, you can see the big old thing that would have been the burial place for the king. If you understand the history of the pyramids and how and why they was built, before they were pyramids, they was called mastabas. It was a rectangular structure, and underneath it, about 80, 90 feet underneath it sometimes, was the tomb of the person. And so what Imhotep did was he put about 6 of these mastabas on top of each other, and they stacked up like that. That's why it's called the step pyramid. Then when you go to the pyramids, I've been to the pyramids 40 times. When you go there, when you go to Saqqara and you step out and you look over here, you could see the bent pyramid and the red pyramid. And you could see that those pyramids was built after the step pyramid by the descendants of the king who built the step pyramid. And then his offspring built the pyramids at Saqqara, at Giza, that they called the Great Pyramid. And so you had you had Khufu, Menkaure, and the other one. And you got the 3 pyramids, right? And so you can see the evolution of how the pyramids was built. So it's not a mystery of how it was built. It's not a mystery of who built them. The people who built them, they are buried at the same site. They say on their tombs, my name is so and so. I was the person who was I was in charge. I was the foreman. And it was my great honor to be the foreman to help me build this pyramid. So if you just look at the evidence before jumping to space people and all this kind of stuff, you can see that these people were smart and that they was able to build these things on there, using their own intelligence. Maybe we don't understand, but there's a lot of things that smart people do that I don't understand. They smart. They figured out how to do things without no will and without no, you'd be like, they'd be taking one stone and rubbing up against another stone, and they make a whole big, beautiful statue.
While he's talking, we can come and get something to eat because this conversation can
It's an eternal conversation.
Yes, we can continue to have the conversation and eat.
Yeah. I got some more questions. What else?
I'm curious about his features.
His features?
Yeah, I've just been staring at his features.
Uh-huh.
Really, his eyes look very Asian.
Asian?
Like,
Okay.
they're very unusual. Like I can't even place his features.
Your eyes look Asian?
I don't know. Well, I mean, his eyes, the shape of his eyes, maybe.
Your eyes look kind of like that too.
The shape of his nose, there's no bridge. It's almost, he reminds me of a lion.
Asian looking features is African features. The Asians got it from the Africans.
I'm just saying that I don't even really can't really even place any human features so much. That nose, he almost looks like a lion
Hmm.
to me.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just gazing and I'm noticing.
Well, at least it didn't get knocked off.
So,
Others.
Well,
Remember the other noses were all knocked off from.
we could talk about that too.
Okay.
yeah, I mean, I'm just curious about this whole situation because I was actually really meditating on, like you said, he was a kind person.
No, I'm not saying he was a kind person, but no, I wasn't saying he was a kind. But the idea that the Pharaoh was evil and mean and cruel is a myth.
Okay, so he wasn't evil and cruel. So he had. So he lived by mouth, like he has like to weigh his heart.
If you committed a crime back then, you're going to get monked up. They might cut off your ear, they might cut your nose off, they might do a lot of different things. But the image they have of the king of Egypt is like he is like oppressing people and making them build pyramids and temples and putting people into slavery. Now, the people that did work, they were paid people. And periodically throughout the year, like say if you was a farmer and during the time that you didn't have to work with your crops, you would go get a job building stuff. So no slaves was being used. So the idea that they was no, they wasn't indentured. They were just seasonal laborers. Oh, okay. It's like right now I don't have no work to do on my farm because of the cycle of the plants, and so therefore I'm gonna go make some extra money, working to build temples and stuff.
So having a king though, it's like patriarchy, right? It's like it's a hierarchy.
It's a higher patriarchy means it's male dominated.
Right. And you have a king.
But I don't think they were patriarchal. I think they were more matriarchal. But they had a king, but the king went to the land of it was matrilineal. It went to the land of the mother.
Okay.
But it was patriarchal. It was patriarchal in the sense that it was a male, but it was matrilineal in the sense that it went to the land of the mother. So what they had a combination.
But the ruler was a man, a king.
The ruler was often the thing that I think that we have to get take into consideration when we talk about Africa is not to be confused by who the king is, because the king is not necessarily the one in charge of everything. When you look at African society, you have different societies. You have like the women. Like if you watch that movie, The Women King, right? The women had a lot of like the king was like, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. Then women said, no, you're gonna do like this, And then the elders say, no, and you're gonna do this too. And then another council said so. And so the king is like, man, I gotta satisfy all these different constituencies, And so oftentimes the women had a lot of say so over the king.
Uh-huh. So did they have, would they have a king and a queen? Or
Yeah, they have a queen.
so, but in this situation, you have the king. Like the big image is of the king.
Well,
Right? I
well,
mean, I'm just gonna, if there's other images of the king and the queen, or it's like.
there's many images of the king and the queen. At this site where this temple is,
Yeah,
right next door is his wife's temple.
yeah. So,
His wife was Nefertari.
right, so you would have a big statue like of this of her, or would it be just him and then you have her temple?
It's statues of her in her temple. Not like that. He didn't do her like that.
Yeah.
But she got her own stuff.
Uh,
And in many statues that you see, when you go to Kemet, or maybe when we go to the museum or something, we might see some. But you have many statues of the man. Like when you go to the Cairo, when you go to the big museum in Cairo, you see a huge statue of the man of the king and the queen seated equally together. You see many images of the male and the female sitting next to each other. You see Tutankhamun and his wife Ankhesenamun, and they're sitting and they're embracing and they're in very intimate. Ramses was just one. Ramses lived to be 92 years old. He had 108 kids or something like that. And he had a whole bunch of, so he was like oversized in his personality and everything. So he did a lot of stuff that was just egotistical. But normally, you didn't see nobody having that degree of grandeur.
okay, that's helpful because I was like, huh. I'm just thinking of him like the being in meditation and also being egotistical and having to be so grand. I just find that's interesting balance.
He's the most powerful person on the planet Earth.
Right.
So of course he's gonna be egotistical. I don't care how much meditation he do.
well, this is what I'm curious about the kindness part. You know,
It's not the kindness. My point was that he wasn't cruel. He wasn't kind either. He wasn't like, oh, okay, I'll let you get away with it. No, I'm gonna cut your nose off. They had harsh punishment back then.
okay, okay. I'm gonna check him out a little.
He,
I'm not sure about him.
he's one. You're talking about. Think about 6,000 years.
Yeah.
He's one ruler out of rulers that existed for 6,000 years.
Yeah. 6,000 years.
Yeah.
Of rulers who existed, but his time was how long?
He was in the he lived to be 92.
Oh, 92.
Yeah.
So how do you get to be the most powerful person on earth in 92 years? You must have done.
Egypt was the dominant country on the planet. It's like the United States.
Right. Okay.
So if you're president of the United States, you're considered, until now Trump will mess it up, but you were considered to be the most powerful country on the world. And so then you are considered to be the most powerful person in the world.
During that period that he was alive.
Yeah. Yeah. During that period, Kemet was the most powerful country on the planet.
To be continued, I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Bring me some food.
During the early, like you was talking about, during the early years of studying with the yoga, did y'all ever go into the teachings of Yogananda?
Yogananda?
Yeah.
No. I mean, a lot of people read. I never really thoroughly read that book. I know a little bit more about Swami Vivekananda, So Vivekananda, he was the first one to come to the United States to bring yoga.
Okay.
He came before Yogananda, and Vivekananda was he came during the 1893 World's Fair that they had in Chicago, but they had a religious conference during that time. And so with Yogananda, he came during the Yogananda, he came in the 1920s, and he went to Howard, and I got pictures of him at Howard University and stuff like that. So my yoga teacher's teacher was a student of Yogananda,
Your yoga teacher.
his teacher. And her name was Becky Love. She lived to be about 103 years old.
Do you know Baba Kalindi?
Yeah, I know. I knew Kalindi. Yeah, yeah,
He was a good friend.
yeah. Yeah, I was looking at your page and I was seeing your little reference to Kalindi and everything. You know, yeah,
He was a good friend of mine.
yeah, yeah. I knew Kalindi. You know, they used to have me come to Detroit for the conference they used to do,
Yeah.
and even before then, back in the maybe the late 70s, 80s, they used to have a big martial arts conference in Chicago,
Right.
and I used to go there and do the Kemetic yoga for it.
Wow.
You know, yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I looked in the window and I saw it down.
Okay.